Back. We're going to get as far as we can in this PowerPoint today here. We talked about last time some different causes, different things that can lead to new species being formed. Okay, kind of wrapped up with these last time that these are the three main forms of speciation that can occur. And I just want to real quick review them, then we'll get into some new material. First was behavioral, or that was if two populations are maybe they're separated for a while, or something happens that the two different populations start having different behaviors. Then, if ever those two populations encounter each other again, are brought back together, well, then they're going to act different, and they may act so different from each other that they don't recognize each other as being the same anymore, and then they're not going to interbreed, and that basically means we have two separate species now. Okay. The next one was geographic speciation. My example here was with the Grand Canyon forming and separating these two populations of closely related squirrels. They are separated by this huge hole in the ground called the Grand Canyon. They can no longer encounter each other in nature. They're geographically separated, and this is leading to speciation, them to become two different species. And lastly, temporal speciation. If two populations of very similar organisms, they're very similar except that they mate or they flower at different times and that those times don't overlap, well, then they can't interbreed. If they're not breeding at the same time, they can't interbreed with each other. Okay? So these are these three main patterns of speciation that we covered the other day. Now, I mean, there are others, of course, other ways that this can happen, but these are kind of the main ones. Now, one of the best known examples of speciation, and in fact, if you remember from that movie way back, one of the things that Darwin saw that really kind of got him thinking along these lines and set him on the path to kind of working out how evolution occurs were the finches that he found on the Galapagos Islands. Okay, so they're a famous example of speciation. Remember, the Galapagos Islands are this isolated island group hundreds of miles off the coast of South America, very far away from anywhere else. And at some point in the past 1,000,000 or 2,000,000 years or so, a small population of finches must have flown there accidentally from South America. Maybe they got up, were flying, and then a storm came along and blew them out to sea, and some of them happened to land on the islands. We don't know exactly what happened. Nobody was there to watch. But we can see that the finches on the islands are very similar in a lot of ways to a species of finch that's common in South America. But on these separate islands, then, the islands are far enough apart from each other that birds don't regularly fly from one to the other in most cases. As we talked about with the tortoises, the habitats on the different islands are different. There are different food sources available. There's different climates. Some have mountains. Some are very low and dry. Some are rainy and chilly. And these different climates, different habitats, have led to what was originally one species of finch, which looked something kind of like this one in the middle, specializing and evolving in all these different islands to form into very different varieties, different species of finch. Now, the reason that this picture here only shows the heads is that the bodies of these different finches still look very similar. There's been very minor changes, if at all, in the wings, in the coloration, in the feathers, anything like that. It's mostly in the beaks, in the heads, that have changed in order to access different foods. And there's even one species that here is called the tool-using finch. You can see it's holding a small twig, and it uses this to kind of poke in insect holes in decaying wood and pry out food, which is just this amazing adaptation. And it has evolved from the original species of finch. This happened because they were reproductively isolated from each other, meaning that these finches here with the long, narrow beak adapted for eating insects, and these finches here with the large, almost parrot-like beak adapted for eating fruit, they live on different islands, so they were unable to interbreed with each other for thousands and thousands, maybe millions of years. And all that time, These are eating more insects and evolving to become better at getting insects. These are eating more fruit, evolving to become better at eating fruit. Okay? And evolution has continued. It still does continue. They're studying these species of finches regularly. There are ongoing studies of them. Okay? Now, there are some other things that can happen, though. Okay? What are some things that can occur over very long periods of time to a species? Well, the first thing is it can go extinct. It's a fact of life is that most species that have ever existed on Earth have gone extinct because there has been so much time and there have been so many species. This graph here shows the black is showing the rate, the percentage of species at any given time that go extinct. Okay, and you can see generally it's a pretty low rate. Okay, however, there have been some times throughout prehistoric times, I guess, throughout prehistory, where this rate of extinction has spiked. Okay, and we call these mass extinctions. You may be familiar, the one that's most commonly talked about is this one at the end of the Cretaceous that killed off the dinosaurs. It also killed off many, many other species. Okay, and you can see that the rate of extinction was very low for hundreds of millions of years until about 65 million years ago. It was probably a gigantic asteroid or something that hit the Earth and caused massive climate change that lasted for many, many years and dramatically changed the environment. The dinosaurs and other species were not able to evolve quickly enough to keep up with that change because it happened so suddenly, practically overnight, and a great many of them went extinct. That was not the greatest mass extinction that's ever occurred, though. There was an even bigger one long before that at the end of the Permian era. And in some places, I think it's aquatic species, so water-dwelling species, something like 90% of them went extinct. Okay. There is an additional mass extinction that is believed to be going on actually right now, caused by human activity. We are causing every day several species worldwide go extinct. Some of them we don't even know about. But human activity, our use of resources, and just the way that we use the earth causes a great many species to go extinct. Okay. Now, this right here, actually, this shows some of the other finches, okay? Aside from going extinct, species can go through adaptive radiation. This is a pattern of evolution of one species evolving to become many, many others. It radiates out, it spreads out, we can think of as they adapt. And here this shows 10 different species that all evolved within the last couple million years from the one original species of finch that arrived in the islands. So adaptive radiation is one species evolving into many others, more or less simultaneously. Okay? Other things, we can have convergent evolution. Oh, this is kind of covering up. That's okay. Convergent evolution is what happens when you have two species that are not closely related, but they live in similar habitats with similar pressures on them, and they end up evolving to become pretty similar. Okay? And this happened, well, it happens all the time, but it has happened notably in Australia. Australia, you may know, it's known for having a lot of weird wildlife, unusual wildlife. Most of the mammals that live there are marsupials, meaning they carry their babies in pouches. Okay, you're familiar with kangaroos, probably. Now, they have a lot of the same climate, a lot of the same habitat that we have in North America, that they have in Europe, and South America, Africa, all over the world. But they have marsupials instead of what we call placental mammals. So they have what they call a marsupial mole. It's not related closely to the moles we have around here, but it lives a very similar life. It tunnels around underground. It has big digging paws in the front and kind of a pointed nose to get around. It looks pretty similar, but they're not related. That's convergent evolution. Okay, you can see here, this is believed to be extinct. They call it the Tasmanian wolf. Okay, it was a marsupial. It was not related to dogs, foxes, wolves at all. But look at how similar this looks to the wolves that we have in North America and Europe. It's through convergent evolution, because the same pressures that caused wolves to evolve, ears on top of their heads, two eyes facing forward, long nose for smelling, and sharp teeth and everything, and legs and tail for adapted for running fast, chasing prey. Well, those same pressures existed in Australia, except, in North America, wolves hunt deer, and in Australia, the Tasmanian wolf hunted, I suppose, kangaroos. Okay? Now, we can also have coevolution. Coevolution is two organisms that evolve together, so much so that neither one of them can survive without the other. And this picture shows a hummingbird, which you may have seen some hummingbirds around, and then a flower that has evolved as a food source for hummingbirds. You can see it's very long, and it is perfectly shaped for the hummingbird's beak to fit in. Now, the hummingbird needs the flower for its food source. The nectar is back here, and that's what the hummingbird uses as its food source. But as the hummingbird reaches back into the flower, of course, it picks up some pollen that then it will carry to the next flower, pollinate, and so then the flowers can produce seeds. Well, there's no other species that can reach the nectar while at the same time picking up the pollen. Insects, bees and things, butterflies, they don't work that way. Their bodies are not shaped right for pollinating this flower. Okay? And a hummingbird can't get nectar from other sorts of flowers, or from some other flowers. So both these species have evolved together. The hummingbird, it wasn't just like one day hummingbirds had, normal short beaks, and then the next day suddenly they, grew these long beaks. This happened over a long period of time as the flowers were also evolving to become shaped in this way. They have evolved together, and now neither can survive without the other. Okay? Now, punctuated equilibrium. This is more a description of how evolution actually occurs over millions of years. It was long thought that evolution worked in a sort of gradualism, where it was just a slow, steady change. One species steadily, over millions of years, evolves a little bit different, little bit different, little bit different. And then at some point we say, okay, it's different enough from what it was back here. Now it's another species. And then that species is a little bit different, a little bit of evolution change, a little bit, little bit, little bit. Okay, now it's another species. It turns out that punctuated equilibrium, which is, a term that's probably deliberately meant to just be really long and make you sound really smart if you use it. Punctuated equilibrium means that what actually really happens with evolution is you have short periods of time, relatively short periods of time, where evolution happens rapidly. As the environment changes, evolution happens rapidly. And then the environment is stable. It's not really changing very much. And if the environment isn't changing, and the species are well adapted to it, well, the species aren't going to change. So the species then stays stable for a long time until the environment changes. Then the species quickly evolve to keep up, and then they're stable for a while. And then the environment changes, and the species quickly evolve to keep up, and then they're stable. This punctuated equilibrium is much more what actually happens with evolution, not so much this gradual change of one into another. Okay? Lastly, evo-devo. This is just this idea that developmental biology and evolutionary biology overlap. Okay? It'll make more sense when I show you the next slide. But there are certain genes that are not for like hair color or height or something. You have genes in your body, and every animal has genes in its body for grow an arm here and grow 2 eyes, not 8. Okay, these are the kinds of genes we're talking about. Now, these genes can change and evolve also. Okay, so if we look here, the body plan of an organism, this happens to be a fruit fly, is determined by this series of 10 or so genes happening in a particular order to have, okay, up here is where we put the head and then the neck and the thorax and the abdomen, and, the organs are put in a certain way and the wings attach here and all this, okay? And if anything were to change with these genes, then the whole body layout of the fly would change. But it turns out that even species that are very distantly related still have these same genes. I mean, they're a little bit different. They've evolved, but they're recognizably very similar genes. This is a mouse embryo. And a mouse, its body plan is determined by these same genes that lay out the body plan of a fruit fly. Okay? So let's call it there. Go back, review anything you missed, but we should have a pretty good understanding of what can actually happen with evolution now. Have a good one.